Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Morning again, my brothers. Gay Buddhist Fellowship welcome you to this gathering, the Sangha this day. We take this opportunity to introduce ourselves to each other. My name is Howard.
Don.
Mike.
Lassiter. Carl. George. Ray. Jay. Tom. Kay. Todd. Michael. Larry. Nobu.
Sylvia.
Steve. Ed. Mark. Paul. David. Jim. Jim. Paul. Robert. Tim. Peter.
Welcome. Anyone here for the first time? Okay. Your name again?
Robert.
From where?
Santa Rosa.
Oh, drove down this morning?
No, I'm staying with a friend.
Oh, welcome. It's my privilege to introduce one of our regulars, our beloved Carol Newhouse. She studied insight meditation for well over 20 years, studied with CIIS and a number of other prominent teachers. She is the founding teacher of the Lesbian Buddhist Sangha in Berkeley. It's always a delight to have you here in our presence and for you to offer Dharma with us. Good morning.
Good morning. It's every time I come down the street, I feel good when I come here, and I've often contemplated that. So I don't know many of you personally, and I think it's some kind of an affinity, like I've said before, that I feel between our sanghas, and even though we haven't really sat together or experienced, I'm the one who goes back and forth. And I really feel a lot of brotherhood and support from who you are and what you're doing and how you're working your practice. So, and it feels similar, it feels familiar to me, and different, which I like both of. So thank you for the warm welcome. As some of you know who've heard me share before, I am increasingly trying to bring where I'm coming from in my life, and since I come here every 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 months or whatever, things happen naturally and occur, and certain emphasis change. And so I've been trying to bring that forth more, my own practice, my own concerns to the Dharma in what I share, not just pick something or whatever. So I've chosen this theme of conflict, I chose to call it this morning, because that's the word that seems to be occurring to me the most in my own life, and from a lot of different directions, and the potential of being able to resolve conflict or contribute to conflict, and how the Dharma and my teachings and my practice inform that and are helping me, or sometimes not helping me, or I don't know how to make it work, kind of thing. So I thought I would share some of that with you this morning. Whether I think about it in my personal life, and some of you have heard me talk, maybe it was the last time, about the fact that I've had a lot of disappointments in my family of origin. My father disowned me for being a lesbian recently, and he died doing that, and it was rather traumatic for the whole family. My brother was complicit in that and contributed to that in certain ways. And he's also still actively trying to steal money from my sister that she inherited. So I don't know if any of you have been involved in these kinds of things, but, family of origin stuff is hard enough, I think. And then with this kind of stuff, money and jealousy and favorites and things going on, and then just because, I'm queer, anyway. So this has been happening for a while, but he died in December, and there's been some things that have been going on this year. So that's the family conflict, and it's continuing, unfortunately. And I try to bring my skillfulness to the situation the best I can. There's also, of course, as we all know, what's going on in the world, in our own country, and in other places like Iraq or even France. You've probably heard about the race riots there. I lived in France for a while, so that affected me really deeply. I could picture it. I lived in the suburbs of Paris, and it was interesting to try to imagine this. So I think for myself, and I'm imagining for some of you, this issue of how to bring our practice and our good self, to these difficult, conflictual situations is not an easy task. Again, whether it be personal, friends, family, community issues, or politics and worldview. And we're almost assaulted, I think, sometimes on a daily basis around the political, aspect of our lives as Americans. So that's sort of how I'd like you to take this, to just maybe as I'm talking to reflect, is there a certain kind of conflict in your life, or more than one? And where's it coming from for you personally? And how are you handling it, whether it's a political judgment, something at work perhaps. I've also had serious issues at work due to Arnold's policies, let's say, affecting people in the workplace, making it harder to do our jobs. All that's happening. So there's so many levels of potential conflict going on. And so if you could just maybe reflect a little as I'm talking, it might make these words a little more alive, than just kind of ideas about things. When I think about teachers that are particularly skillful working around these issues, I cannot think of anyone who I associate more with this than Thich Nhat Hanh. That's probably not surprising to someone who had to deal with conflict, war, having to leave his own country, seeing his monasteries destroyed, seeing his friends die, and the way that he has, over the years, used his practice to heal himself and to heal his Sangha and to heal all of us. So I'll be talking a little bit about him. Before I get into that, though, I may have referred this book to you before. It's a Thich Nhat Hanh book, but it's one not a lot of people have read. It's called Fragrant Palm Leaves. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's his journal. So it's actually journal writings from 1962 to 1966, when all this was coming down, when he was a young man, as a monk. And some of it's when he's in the United States, some of it's when he's in Vietnam, and he's trying to make decision constantly as things get worse and worse about how to deal with this conflict, this happening in the way I described. And eventually it ends with him leaving Vietnam, and moving to France and to the United States. So it's very beautifully written, and it's a journal, which I think is very personal, And so I'd highly recommend it if people are interested in this topic. One of the things I like about Thich Nhat Hanh so much is he talks about things in very simple terms, and he uses nature images a lot. So the one of his favorites that works really well for me when I think about conflict and anger and resentment and all this, that certainly in my current family situation is present. I think about this whole idea of seeds and the garden that he has. And he says, of course, that we have the seeds within us of all potentiality, right? We have the seeds of anger and resentment, even cruelty, and we also have the beautiful seeds, of love and compassion. And he used the gardener's image, and he says we are to water, right, the seeds of love and compassion, and not particularly water the seeds of anger, conflict, resentment. And obviously what we water or we cultivate grows, within us. So although he uses very simple images, I find them very universal, very powerful. So I just wanted to bring that image forth. And he also calls it transforming our compost, which I really like. All this stuff is brewing, and how's it going to turn out? What's going to actually come out? Is a flower going to grow from that garden, or are we going to keep polluting it and throwing pesticides on ourselves and other people? It's really a beautiful way of thinking. And in the Theravada, you'll always hear them talking about cultivating this practice and cultivating that. It's a gardener's, if you want, word, really. It's an agricultural word. I like it. I looked conflict up in the dictionary the other day. That's another Very simple practice that I would really recommend. Again, to reduce things down to simple things. Like, oh my God, what's going on? Well, I feel like I'm in conflict with my whole family. It keeps coming up. And I think, okay, what is it? What is this process that's going on? So I look it up, and it tells me exactly. Well, to be in conflict is to show antagonism. Well, that fits. Everybody's antagonistic. But also something else, to show antagonism and irreconcilability. So in other words, you're not only upset or pissed off or having a hard time with this, you're getting entrenched. You have a position. You are, because there couldn't really be a strong conflict, right, really without a strong opposition to some degree. So showing antagonism and irreconcilability. I thought that was something that I was going to try to remember when I feel myself moving into these situations. Am I doing those two things? Am I nurturing conflict by being in those two positions? So I thought, we'll see how much time we have, but I thought I would pick some of my favorite Dharma teachings, traditional teachings from Theravada Buddhism particularly, that you may have heard of before, and try to see them through the eyes of conflict. So for your consideration, one of my favorites I always come back to when I'm confused, and I can't remember who I am, is what the Theravada calls the three characteristics of our existence, or who we really are, the three things that we really are as human people. And they have Pali words, anicca. You heard that word? It means impermanence. Dukkha, so you've heard that word. It seems to be the most popular one. Suffering or pain. And the last one, anatta, which is usually the least popular one. And that has to do with selflessness, or no solid self, it's been translated as, or just emptiness. The Zen tradition tends to use that word more. And this is what we're supposed to be all about. This is our existence, nothing else besides these three things. And they can be profound things to study. According to my understanding of Theravada, when you really become a deep meditator, you realize these three things. That's what your enlightenment, your realization is about, is these three things, and how and that leads you to truth or enlightenment. So how does conflict show itself, or how do we deal with conflict? Looking at it through the sort of the understanding of anicca, or impermanence. The Dharma would say that all conflicts, however difficult, are what? In a state of change. Right? They're impermanent. They are not solidified, no matter how much it may feel that way to you at the time, right? And it certainly seems that way for me and my family right now, I must say. I'm not even being able to be on speaking terms with my brother right now. So that feels very solidified, right? It's never going to change. He doesn't live here. What am I going to do? But the truth of our existence, and I'm taking a personal example, but it could be a political one as well, is that there's movement happening. There has to be. Whether it's my thoughts about him, his thoughts about me, little actions that he may or may not be doing in his life that are directly or indirectly related to this conflict. Something's happening, something's moving here. And if I establish too strong a position, I'll not be able to see those changes. I won't be able to sense those changes. We could talk psychology a bit. I'll project my reality, whatever, and I won't be able to see that he's moved a little tiny bit maybe in a certain way. And the other part of it is I won't even be able to see that I'm changing. As upset as I may be about all this, if I really sit with it and I understand the nature of anicca, I understand that I am not the same person that was in Florida when we were, facing off. I'm not that person anymore. I'm somebody else. Yes, I'm sort of that person. I have the memory of that, but I'm also someone else today. And you know how the Dharma says every day is a new beginning. I have to really hold that. I have to hold that as reality, not just a nice thought, impermanence. When in conflict, we're constantly recreating it or resolving it. Thich Nhat Hanh says there's only things that you could be doing right now. Working for non-harming or working towards harming. There's no real neutral place. That's another illusion, I think. That's another whole discussion. But I think, and it can be very subtle. I'm not saying we're doing something fantastic and awful all the time, but we're moving in a direction of healing, goodwill, whatever, or we're kind of not moving in that direction. We're moving maybe somewhere else. It's kind of how we're moving. And so if you bring that change kind of dynamic into conflict, you realize that I'm either recreating it or kind of resolving it within myself or in connection with the world around me. There's a million of these little books of Thich Nhat Hanh's, as you probably know. This one's called Touching Peace, which I think is the one for me that speaks directly to this issue, mostly about conflict, whether it's interpersonal or social political. He does the whole gamut. And I wanted to read a little bit about what he said around the more social political nation kind of conflict, because I think you can make a direct parallel between that into the personal. It's really interesting, for me anyway, to think about it that way. In this case, he's talking about, I'm not sure which altercation, but maybe it was the Gulf War, I'm not sure. Sounds like it might have been a potential demonstration. So everything is ready to explode, but we are all co-responsible. So right from the get-go, he understands the interconnection. This is more the anatta piece about how we're all interconnected, and it couldn't possibly be that it's all my fault or all their fault. That's just not reality. We are all co-responsible. Not only does the one who is beaten suffer, so here he's talking about a demonstration. Not only does the one who is beaten suffer, but the ones who are doing the beaten also suffer. The ones who are perpetrators also suffer, right? Now I know we know this and we think of it psychologically sometimes, but in the moment it's really hard to grasp, right? When you feel you've been done wrong. It's really hard for me to grasp how my brother's suffering has caused him to act in the way he has. I had much higher expectations for him, and I was very disappointed and feel totally betrayed by him. I mean, I could get right into it. You can feel the energy coming up. But that's really not helpful. What's helpful is to remember that although I am suffering, so is he. For the ones who are doing the beating also suffer. If not, why would they do it? He asks. I mean, do they just do it because, whatever, they like to do these things? Does my brother like to steal money from my sister because, I don't know, he's just stupid or something? No, it's not that simple. There's a lot of karmic causes going on here, inside of him, inside the whole family. Only if you suffer will you make other people suffer. It's another one I really like. He's unhappy, obviously, or he wouldn't be acting in this way. Not that I'm totally responsible for all his unhappiness either, but he is unhappy and he needs to be seen that way. If you are peaceful and happy, you will not inflict suffering on other people. Most likely not. You could think about that. I've been thinking about that. And I do notice that when I'm in a good mood, I just like to translate this into common language. When I'm feeling good about myself, or I'm just in a good mood, maybe I've done a lot of metta practice or something, I'm much less likely to come from a conflictual orientation. I feel connected. I feel enjoying life. The second factor of existence, dukkha. You're familiar with how the Buddha talks about dukkha being caused by clinging to our hurt and to our viewpoint. That's kind of a basic teaching, right? We always talk about clinging or attachment. That's the cause of suffering. Well, in this case, I'm skewing it a little towards the conflict situation again. Well, yes, we're attached to our viewpoint. We are now attached to our views and our opinions about what happened. Carol's very attached, to my father's judgments of me, to the fact that my brother's acting the way he is. I do feel I'm right about certain things. There's no doubt about that. But what do we really understand about this word attachment? And I'm not going to do a whole lecture on it this morning, but I think it's something we need to look into, this whole issue of clinging to our views. And again, Thich Nhat Hanh is very strong in this when you talk to him, because he saw through his own life what happened, politically, when his country broke apart, and then we got involved, and French, and everybody had their viewpoint, right? And that's what led to a lot of the destruction. But by saying that we shouldn't cling to our opinions, I don't mean that we should not have viewpoints. And here's this is the tricky part, right? As I said, I have this viewpoint about what's going on in my family. It's changing, it's moving, but I still have my viewpoint. Well, the Buddha talks about discerning mind and talks about that it's fine to have clarity of vision and a take on what's happening. We have to be responsible, right? We have to have a view of what's going on. That's okay. The question is, what do we do when we are sure that there is harm being done? For me, that's the question. I have a viewpoint. You can have a viewpoint about whether you liked a movie or not. That's usually, well, I could even get heavy, but usually that would be kind of, okay, you just debate a little about whether the movie was good. But if I have a viewpoint about being gay, or I have a viewpoint about my brother stealing money from the trust, or I have a political, social viewpoint, right? Or a spiritual viewpoint even, right? And I'm clinging to that could be harming. We can certainly see how certain spiritual viewpoints in our country are harming right now. We don't want to perpetuate that ourselves. We want to think, oh, we're Buddhists, we know better than everybody else too, right? I mean, it's the same thing. We can talk about the conservative right, but, So it's not like we can't have a belief system or an understanding, but we just can't inflict it on anyone, especially if we think there could be some harm involved in that. And this is really difficult. This is subtle. This isn't easy to figure all this out. I'm just saying this is what I try to work with, and I recommend us doing. As you know, the Dharma takes a nonviolent stance towards life and conflict. So another way of thinking about this is we may bear witness to suffering, or we can bear witness to potential harm. It's another way of thinking it, I think. In a skillful manner, not as to cause more harm. That's tricky. And that's what I'm really dealing with my family. I'm just using this example because it's up for me. You could put it on anything. But I have stuff at the workplace like this too. Like, how do I, especially when you're a boss, actually, I could bring in the issue of authority, because we live in an authoritarian kind of country. So in my family, my father thought he was the authority. But in that case, around the siblings, we're kind of more equal. But if I'm in a job, or certainly in a government or something, then I'm an authoritarian person or a police person. So authority can come into it too. And that makes it even harder, I think, to be skillful, about your viewpoint. So I can bear witness to something, my truth, but I have to be careful not to alienate or harm too many people by it. Or what's the point? So that's another question that comes up. I'm not going to talk a lot about forgiveness, because that's another whole topic. But the healing of dukkha, or suffering, is often involved with metta and forgiveness. As you know, forgiveness in this context, of course, for me, does not mean saying that harming is okay and that what my father and brother did is fine. That's not what I'm talking about. But it's talking about forgiveness for me so that I can go on with my life, not live in anger and hatred. And it also helps lead to less conflict and less repetition of harm. It's about letting go of the anger and hurt and moving on. But see, I see it as a dance, because as I let go of the anger and hurt, let's say in my situation, something more is going to happen. I just get over something, and then my brother does something again, let's say. Or I get an angry letter, or something happens, there's an event. And then, I'm back in my process again, right? What is this? What does he think he's doing? So now I'm back there. So I see it as, Nietzsche is the most powerful one for me. It always has been. The evolving dance of that. and knowing where I am in the cycle each time. Okay, now I'm getting into my resentment again. Okay, be with it, handle it in whatever way. Okay, now I need to speak my truth, or I don't, or is it going to be harmful or helpful, or how am I going to do that? Okay, and now is there something I can let go of here, either with these people or at least for myself, so that I can move on. Sometimes these situations, are like that. Say if you're in the workplace, sometimes it's like that for me. I let go of one argument and I turn around, there's another person with a problem. It's just like this. This one is very slow now. These people don't live near me. Well, my sister does, but my father is dead and my brother lives far away, and so it's slow now. There's a lot of distance. So I have time to make some of these things happen. So I think you have to think about that. If you're right up against it all the time, it takes more skill, I think, to move more quickly through all these things. And the other thing is anatta. No self, emptiness. My favorite version of this in English is no separate self. So it depends on how you want to think about it, how you've been taught, or what your reality is for this one. But it works really nice with conflict. It gets me off the hook right away. Did I cause all this? I couldn't possibly have caused all this, because I'm not the only person involved. It seems so, of course, but I don't think, I'll say for myself, it's hard to totally embody these truths, so that when it comes up, you can really see, something like this happening. It's not like that, or it's not just all about me, or just them, or him, or her, or even Bush. It's much bigger than that. And we're all interconnected in it. When I see that I'm not alone in a conflict, let's say, that not only many actions, have contributed to this, but also many thoughts. Especially in my situation where I'm so far away from it on a daily basis. And a lot of it is here, It's what I'm thinking about. But even in the workplace sometimes, I go home and, about somebody at work or a new edict from Sacramento or something, and I'm fanning the fire, not meaning to, certainly, but I am, and I'm participating in the conflict in that moment, karmically, if you want to think of it that way, even though I'm not taking any action about it. I am feeding. This is my experience of it and understanding anyway. So we have to think of the karmic and historic factors that have brought about a conflict as well. Even an interpersonal conflict, sometimes that's the hardest in a way. Because you know how we sort of face off with one person, or I face off with my family, or you face off with the boss. But really, if I was even to think about my family for a while, our grandparents, the ancestors that came before, their value system, what they taught my father, what his mother was like, what his life was like. Even the children, the younger people now, who are the next generation, are hearing about this, and they're going to have a position, an attitude, and they're talking to each other about it, or not talking about it, or so this is affecting a lot of people. It's a lot beyond my control. And when I realize I'm not in control, it's scary, but it's also tremendous relief. So I would suggest that you concentrate on the relief part of that. Rather than worrying about, I have to make it happen, or it's my conflict, or I'm the gay person of the family, and I have to do whatever. It's true. I want to do something. How much can I really do? There's other powerful people involved. Or if there aren't, or they're not acting as if they are, maybe they could be empowered a little to be more helpful. Because they are involved, whether they want to realize it or not. In a long, enduring conflict, I've thought about that. The difference between something that just pops up in the workplace and then somehow the fire can be put out. This one I'm in now is beginning to take on more enduring. But you usually think of this, sometimes family, think of Shakespeare. you know what I mean, some of those dramas. But also nations, you know, and religious conflicts. You think of these long enduring things, Israel and Palestine, you know. Divorce can turn into one. You know, it can get over with pretty quickly, a breakup, or it can go on forever. We all know that. When we think of the long enduring battles or wars, things like this, we really have to think, I think, in terms of the cultural or karmic contribution that everyone's making to it and not take ourselves too seriously. Again, that doesn't mean that we don't have a contribution to make, but it's not all about us. We must not sit in blaming ourselves, in judgment of ourselves, all about us. You see how this relates to anatta. You know, we can get kind of ego involved in a conflict, of course. And when very righteous, you've seen this happen. I'm sort of that way about some of the things about my family right now. But it's only hurtful. It doesn't help me, and it's not truth. See, that's what the Dharma would say. It's an illusion. You know, it's not just about you. So I would say our job is to look deeply into the conflict and try to see how we are contributing to the suffering. If there's just one thing we can do, that's all. Don't try to fix anybody else right away. Try to come up with a big answer to everything. Although there's a lot of probably ability sometimes for some of us to do that. You know, we're pretty good probably at people who are good at resolution. But I think the primary thing is looking at ourselves, looking at the conflict, and see we are contributing to it in some way. We have to be. I have to be contributing to this, even though I often don't see it. How could it be otherwise again? If anicca, dukkha, and anatta are true, the true nature of who I really am, then it's impossible that I'm not involved in this. Or it wouldn't be happening. I wouldn't be there. It wouldn't be, you know. So, if everybody was doing that, obviously we would have a much better situation. I wanted to read you something that Sister Teresa has to say about all this. People are often unreasonable, illogical, and self-centered. You know, she had kind of a brusque way of being. Forgive them anyway. If you are kind, people may accuse you of selfish, ulterior motives. Be kind anyway. What you spend years building, someone could destroy overnight. Build anyway. The good you do today, people will often forget tomorrow. Do good anyway. Give the world the best you have, and it may never be enough. Give the world the best you've got anyway. You see, in the final analysis, it is between you and God. It was never between you and them anyway. So I think what I read through that more Christian interpretation in the end there is it's about your spiritual path. It's about your development as an individual. It's about your relationship with yourself or your Dharma understanding. That's what you're working on. It's not about them, ultimately. It's pretty high standards again. Okay, let's see how much more of this I can do. It wouldn't be complete without at least touching on the precepts. I have to do it. Because, you know, this is what we're given. We're given at least 5 precepts that, and I think it's a beautiful gift, that we are instructed or sometimes invited to use or to try to apply in situations where we're confused, and especially if there's conflict or potential conflict. Now, I'm sure you've had other speakers that have talked, I won't go into this too much, about how these are really training principles. These are not, at least from my viewpoint, they're not rules. And it's hard sometimes culturally for us to adapt to that because some of us grew up with things like commandments. Talk about rules. You know, so it almost sounds like a military thing, you know, I was realizing. So in that case, there's a lot of worry and blame and failure and success, you know, involved in the potential idea of precepts. So let's just put that aside and try to see these things as training vows or principles. Not even vows, not even promises. You could promise if that works for you. But just as suggestions for your own training. Often a conflict can be helpful with these training principles. I find it very comfortable and helpful for safety, for creating safety for people, because I find that a lot of conflict usually evolves around fear and people feeling unsafe. I won't go into this today, there's not enough time, but there was a conflict years ago in our Sangha, and it all came down to a person not feeling safe. And this woman had, from my viewpoint, she was just the one who felt the least safe. You know how it is in a group, there's always different people, and there's continuum. And she had had a history of certain kinds, and she didn't feel safe with certain kinds of lack of rules, lack of ethical committee maybe, and things like this to police things. I don't really mean she didn't mean police, but, to control things, let's put it that way. And our Sangha is, from what I understand of you, is rather the same. There's no police, There's not even a strong Dharma teacher, right? There's just a committee, and there's well-meaning men who meet together and try to live up to, let's say, these precepts, for example. And, it can get messy. It's not easy. And people can get hurt, and there's nobody specifically to turn to, And that's okay with me, my Sangha. That's what we're about. We're about doing this ourselves. And I hope I'm not projecting too much, but I think you're sort of like that, too. And you invite teachers, and that's great, but you don't have anybody ultimately, up there. And this made her insecure. And it also made her insecure that I was sort of up there. So it was difficult for her and some others. And to make a long story short, safety became a big issue. And I learned from that it's really hard to make everybody feel safe. It's just really hard. It's something. We try our hardest, but we have to work ourselves on our own thing about safety. And if we don't feel safe, we can sometimes leave a situation or whatever. It can't be perfect, from my viewpoint anyway. So, but these help a lot with safety. And so that's why I was bringing that whole issue up. And they're always put in the negative, not always, but often. So do not do this. Don't do that. Right? Don't steal, for example. Again, that puts up a tendency for us to think about what I shouldn't be doing rather than what I could be doing instead. Right? I like the other side. So, for example, do not do harm or refrain from doing harm. You could make up your own other side of the coin. But I like nurture and protect life always. It's nice. And that's kind of a Thich Nhat Hanh take again about watering the good seeds. Do not take what is not given. Don't steal. Or be generous. Be sharing. We said, if we're concentrating on our generosity, we're not really thinking too much about taking stuff. Can't hold both of those at the same time. I rewrote the sexual misconduct one because it doesn't really say exactly what not to do, or there's some controversy about that, but it's about not doing something, We know that. So I said, partake in sexual acts out of love and affection. That's similar to Thich Nhat Hanh, and then adding, and awareness of the consequences to all involved. That's the hard part. And again, if you think karmically in the big picture, like I was saying about the interconnection of all things, any person that you're doing sex with, you're not just doing sex with them. That was always why I was so monogamous, actually, because I always felt like I was touching, or my partner was touching so many other situations and individuals by being sexual with them and then bringing it home, which was a lot for me. But even if you don't see it that way energetically, you certainly have to acknowledge that there's consequences of this very powerful thing. Not to not act on it, but just be aware, maybe even discuss it sometimes, about, ooh, what could come of this, has a lot of difficulty because it's such a powerful energy, I think, more than anything else. And then this one. This is always hard for us. So don't tell lies, don't gossip. Speak truthfully with words that inspire confidence, joy, and hope. If you think that through. Speak truthfully. Okay, well, there's a lot of emphasis on honesty, right, in the Dharma, and even in our culture. We try to be honest with each other, recovery programs, a lot of things, honesty. Yeah, but have you ever seen anybody batter someone with their honesty? I mean, I have. And even if it is the truth, or sort of the truth, So, again, the Dharma, from my understanding, would say, speak truthfully with words that inspire joy and hope and confidence. So you're not knocking somebody down with your truth, you know what I mean? You're finding, and this is not easy, I have found, you're finding a way of saying something or trying to correct something that's really, somebody's in denial about something, it's not right, But on the other hand, how can I do that, especially if a lot of people are involved, so that it doesn't become more harming and hope and good things come of that truth. I was looking this morning before I came here because there's a discourse. If anybody knows it, please tell me about it, because I had it memorized and it's escaping me now in my older age. But it was the Buddhist teaching to his son Rahula, where he talks about this issue of truth, and he instructs him, and it's something like, if you want to speak truth, think about, and then he has all these things. It's similar to this, but it's much more detailed, like who it could harm, what could happen because of it, and if there's any hesitancy, remain in noble silence. That's the final thing. And by the time all these things are gone through, it's pretty hard to speak at some point. So I don't know if I go that far, but it's really something to think about in this speak the truth thing. Ego, gets involved a little in that. I know what really happened. I'm going to tell everybody. Well. Joseph Goldstein talks about this a little bit, about speaking truthfully. Let's see if I can find it quickly. Yes. Right speech means not speaking what is untrue or using slanderous, abusive, or harsh language. But then he says, rather speaking words which are honest and helpful, creating a vibration of peace and harmony. So it's the same conundrum. How do you speak the truth and yet create harmony? It's not easy. Truthfulness in speech becomes the basis for being honest in our own minds. And that is when things begin to really open us, he says. Things start to happen for us in our own minds. When we begin to see clearly, working through all the neuroses of the mind. So what he's talking about there is again about us. Speaking our truth in this kind of way means we have to look through our real motivation, our real intention, putting this thing out in the world. What's behind this? Is it just because people should know about this? Well, I guess. Why should they know? Maybe they should. But let's think about it. Let's balance that a little. Okay? So it all comes back to our own mind and heart, I think, for Goldstein. That fourth precept stuff. So the meditation practice and our daily life practice bring us increasingly into awareness of our own thoughts. And as I said, our own motivations. In conflict situations, I think a lot about the three poisons, greed, hatred, and delusion, and particularly delusion. We can be easily deluded into what I was just talking about, speaking a truth in a hurtful way, for example, not speaking the truth, not honoring the truth, clinging to our viewpoints, deluded into the fact that we're not clinging to something when we really are. Very painful. That's the pain, I think, the difficulty that makes it so hard. My hurt in my family, I always want to speak. I always want to tell them, and I really have to watch that because it's not going to be helpful right now. So just in closing, there is, I won't go through it today, but you're probably familiar with it. There's the peace treaty that is in Thich Nhat Hanh's book here that I talked about, Touching Peace. You're probably familiar with it. He was so concerned with how to build a community, when he went to France and left his monasteries and everything in Vietnam. He came up with an actual prescription of how, for Sangha, because that's what he was building, how to eliminate conflict. And what he's got it with 2 individuals. But from my experience, it's usually much bigger than that. But he's doing it with 2 individuals, and he gives very specific instruction about what the angry ones should do and what they should do about their anger and how they should proceed towards each other. And he would even have them sign this. I'm just going to read the very beginning of what's on the preamble to the peace treaty. In order that we may live long and happily together, in order that we may continually develop and deepen our love and understanding. So here's the motivation piece. We, the undersigned, vow to observe and practice the following. So he's really setting up a situation where if there's conflict, which is inevitable, the seeds of negativity are within us, then we have a procedure here. It's really quite beautiful. I've tried it a little bit with some of my friends, but there's not a whole lot of friends I could get to do this. But I did do it a couple of times, and it was very helpful, just with one friend, but she was willing to do it. So it takes 2 to tango, as we know. Spirit Rock also has ethical guidelines for teachers that are very helpful, been helpful to me. I know that the Berkeley Zen Center and maybe San Francisco Zen Center has put a lot of energy into thinking, now I'm just talking about Sanghas, into how to resolve conflicts, and they have some rules and things that they abide by or try to abide by besides the precepts. When it came up for me, I just told them precepts. I just said, look, we have it. It's here. We're just not using it. We don't need to go and invent 15 new ethical principles, to try to work through this. We have the Dharma. We can use it. We just aren't skillful enough, probably, to be able to use it to its fullest benefit. So that's the position I had. And then, synchronicity. Last night when I was going through some of my old papers, one of your old newsletters popped out of my stuff. And I found that, and I don't have any idea if you use this anymore, this is 1998. Someone had put the 6 Accords of the Sangha by Thich Nhat Hanh in the newsletter. And it just kind of fell out, and I noticed I had a star next to something, so I picked it up. And so I thought I'd close by just reading them to you, because it's from your own newsletter. Whatever. And again, very simple and to the point, Sharing space. Sharing the essentials of daily life. Observing the same precepts. Speaking harmoniously. Sharing insights and understanding. Respecting one another's viewpoints. Thank you very much. Well, I took us pretty close to the end. Sorry, but I don't know. I got inspired by my own conundrum, and I love sharing with you. So thank you.
Carol, thank you very much. You'll be available to address questions afterwards during our social time. Great, thank you. It's a privilege to hear your reflections. It's time for announcements. Also, I wanted to ask you if you can offer a dedication of merit for us as we close. Announcements, Sonia.
I'm Todd. I'm the host today. There's pumpkin bread, which is not good vegan. I'm sorry. And apples. If you use a teacup, please wash it out afterwards and put it out to dry on the rack. There's a Dawn bowl going around. There's a donation of $5 to $8 to keep the Sangha going. And afterwards, people get together for lunch sometimes. So if you want to go, just kind of hang out at the door or look for someone, especially if you're a new member. drop crumbs on the floor, please pick them up because there's mice. That's every day.
Also, Lassiter, and we are looking for someone to do a February public. Contact me, I'll be sure to hear every week.
I'll do it.
What? Hey.
At least the next one is next April.
Clint and then Kane.
Well, I'm about to say, I don't know Kay does, but Kay and his partner, the Virgins, they offered their beautiful home for Thanksgiving, GDF Thanksgiving. And so I just wanted to, those of us that was in the newsletter, I've taken the liberty of making flyers for it too, if people want more information about what the content is. It's got nice culture pieces. So it's like a little art project. Just take them out and you can and one other thing, somebody be willing to volunteer to circulate the all because it tends to use a lot of table by itself. We have to make donations that we very much need to keep us on that one.
You'll be the Donna Heralder.
Just related to the Thanksgiving thing, I have directions to my place from San Francisco, but you can adopt this instruction if you're coming from South Bay, wherever. So if you're interested in coming to Thanksgiving, just let me know that I can give you kind of a little map and directions.
Where can we bring cake?
Please let me know when you're coming, then we can discuss because I need to sign.
I attended last year. Beautiful home, delightful experience. Darren, you want to give us a heads up?
Yeah, doing a meditation practice study group. It's usually the second Sunday of the month, but next weekend being Veterans Day, I wanted to put it off another week to the 20th between Veterans Day and Thanksgiving Sunday. Starts at 9:45 before this meeting, right here. And so in 2 weeks from today, we'll study about meditation. So please join us and spread the word.
Yeah, the last 2 weeks prior to this, Temple Smith is here. He's the head now of the BASE project, the Boots Peace Fellowship, the Boots Life and Social Engagement. And they're having some new groups start in January. And it's for people who are doing service work or who are doing activist work to do it with a Buddhist framework. And really, I was thinking about that as Carol was talking, how really fundamentally important it is to bring our Buddhist perspective to whatever we do in terms of eradicating poverty or any other social or political issues. And my tendency, like a lot of us, is to be totally entrenched, just like Carol said. And I also have done the BASE program, and I strongly suggest you look into it. They ask that you do 5 hours of social work a week, and then you meet once a week. And then 1 day a month, you have a retreat. This is for 6 months. And it's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful program, and it really helped me a lot. Since we're going into 2006, which is, an election year, you might want to consider it. Also, there's one on communication. There's a BASE group starting on communication. So, the information is, you can get the information from him at base@bpf.org. Try it, you'll like it. It's great.
There's a couple of flyers out there, too.
There should be some flyers out there.
Wonderful. Any other announcements? Just a thought from Lao Tzu as Carol was talking. He teaches that true mastery can be gained by allowing things to go their own way. cannot be gained by interfering. It's been a powerful teaching and resource for me. We stand and take one another's hands.
Like to dedicate the merit of our sitting and meeting together today to all beings who suffer. May they deepen in their understanding of their contribution to their own suffering and to conflict in the world. And may they work towards revolution. Revolution? Resolution. That was good. Resolution. Revolution. Resolution and forgiveness. That was great. I have to remember that one.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.